Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
So Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome once again to yet another episode of Unity in Diversity. My name is Madan Gopal Das, and we have with us once again His Grace Kalakantha Prabhu, who is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, is a member of the Sabha, which is the advisory body to the GBC. He's also initiating Guru in ISKCON, and he's a leader of this vision of developing a very successful Krishna House ashram-based preaching model in North America. Today, there are 7 established Krishna House programs going on in place, with 11 more under development, and they're growing at a very rapid pace, and there's a lot of enthusiasm around that. So thank you, Kalakantha Prabhu, for being with us this morning. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So today's discussion will focus on one topic, the topic of Varnashram, the sacred social system of Varnas and ashrams. We know this is an important topic. Srila Prabhupada talked about it quite a bit. So I'll quote something from Srila Prabhupada just to get us going. He says, chanting will go on. That is not stopped. But at the same time, the Varnashram Dharma must be established to make the way easy. Vaishnava is not so easy. The Varnashram Dharma should be established to become a Vaishnava. It is not so easy to become a Vaishnava. Then Harishari Prabhu says, no, it's not a cheap thing. Prabhupada says, yes. Therefore, this should be made Vaishnava. To become Vaishnava, it is not so easy. If Vaishnava to become is so easy, why so many fall down? It is not so easy. Then the purport to 5.19.19, Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes, the Krishna consciousness movement is being propagated all over the world to reestablish the Varnashram Dharma system and thus save a human society from gliding down to hellish life. There are literally dozens of quotes. Srila Prabhupada states the necessity and possibility of establishing Varnashram and of the need of the Krishna consciousness movement to do so. Here's just one more. It says in the purport to 4.14.19, Srimad Bhagavatam, once the populace is situated in the Varnashram Dharma, there's every possibility of real life and prosperity, both in this world and the next. So coming to the core point in today's ISKCON and our ISKCON leadership, we have a disciple of Srila Prabhupada who is a guru. He's a strict sannyasi. His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj. And he is recently referred to ISKCON leadership's ongoing war against Srila Prabhupada's clearly stated instructions. So Kalakantha Prabhu, is ISKCON leadership at war with Srila Prabhupada instructions about Varnashram? Because that's the sense that we may be getting. So if you can kindly clarify from your side what Maharaj might be referring to, perhaps your understanding of it.
Excuse me, I'd have to respectfully disagree with my old friend Bhakti Vikas Swami. He and I first met in 1976 in Belfast, Ireland. He was a brahmachari. We were both brahmacharis. He had just been initiated and was helping establish a center there. And we've retained a friendship ever since then. So although we see things often very differently. So to look at scriptures and come away with different views and different conclusions is to be expected. It's called hermeneutics, that is, interpretation of scripture. My friend Dr. Thomas Hopkins, the late professor of who was very close with ISKCON and Srila Prabhupada, he once said that the strength of our movement is that we have so much from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada may be the most widely researched and written about religious leader in history. I mean, that's a defensible position. So many memoirs, the biography, so much He has left us in writing, in his books and letters, all the lectures transcribed. We have such a tremendous lexicon from Srila Prabhupada. So Dr. Hopkins said, yes, that's a strength, but it's also your weakness, because if there's any contradiction, then people will jump all over that. And this is why the study of scripture analytically is so important, with the understanding that people will come to different points of view. That's hermeneutics. The Mahabharata, of course, says that every philosopher has to have their different interpretation of philosophy. So Prabhupada said so many things. In discussing what he said and coming to a reasonable conclusion, we have to practice what's called a vada discussion. That is, where we listen to each other, we understand each other's perspectives and points of view to maintain a Vaishnava decorum. The opposite of that is called a jalpa discussion, which means both parties are talking, not listening to each other. They are pulling out their leverage in any way they can, and they try to win their point, not by reason and debate, but by threats and force. So in discussing Varnashram, we really have to see the tremendous wealth of statements Srila Prabhupada made on the subject. There's a book called Speaking on Varnashram that was edited by Harrikrishna Dasi. Beautiful job she did, taking all of Srila Prabhupada's quotes on the Varnashram subject and categorizing them, analyzing them. And that really allows us to see the broad picture of this very involved topic of Varnashram. To me, the essential point of Varnashram is that it, as Prabhupada said in these quotes that you just mentioned, it is important, very important for the wide social application of Krishna consciousness to bring people to bhakti yoga.
Thank you, Prabhu. With all due respect, though, we understand, and Prabhupada has also emphasized this point, that scripture, Shastra is always the center. Understand, right? There's a trivium of Guru Sadhu Shastra, and we need to always use scripture as the ultimate tiebreaker. That's the foundation, always at the center. We can't override Shastra. Not letters from Srila Prabhupada, not lectures, Shastra, the actual quote, the actual verse. Vedic injunctions are what are to be followed, to be implemented. For example, when Srila Prabhupada was physically present, our deity standards are very simple. But today we have improved our standards as time goes by. And these improvements are based on Shastra. We didn't make them whimsically. So we're doing different things now than when Prabhupada was physically manifest. But still, we're confident that we're following Shastra and there's no debate about it. So we can certainly improve ISKCON also in this whole aspect of the societal, the Varnashram and so on, by understanding and implementing Shastra directly, more closely, as the highest priority of, or the highest, authority, so to speak.
Well, with all due respect, Prabhu, if we're working within the institution that Srila Prabhupada established as the founder Acharya of ISKCON, then we have to follow Srila Prabhupada. That verse that I mentioned from Mahabharata concludes, because there are so many different views on philosophical issues, therefore, Mahajana Yena Gata Sapanta, we have to follow in the footsteps of the great authorities in Krishna consciousness. So what or who could be a greater authority in ISKCON than its founder Acharya? So what Srila Prabhupada says is the final word, and that is, of course, complicated because he says different things in different places. But it is not a fair argument to say that whatever he says in Shastra is always superior to what he said in other circumstances. If I may, I'll give you an example here. This is from the Nectar of Devotion. One should begin the worship, Prabhupada writes, in his Shastra, in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Prabhupada's edition, one should begin the worship of the demigod Ganapati, who drives away all impediments in the execution of devotional service. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that Ganapati worships the lotus feet of Lord Nrsimhadev, and in that way has become auspicious for the devotees in clearing out all impediments. Therefore, all devotees should worship Ganapati. There we go. So then Srila Prabhupada writes, concerning Ganesh worship, it is not actually necessary for us. But if someone has a sentiment for getting the blessings of Ganesh in order to get large amounts of money for Krishna's service, then it is all right. But anyone who takes up this kind of worship must send me at least $100,000 monthly, not less. If he cannot send this amount, then he cannot do Ganesh worship. So after this letter, of course, there was no more Ganesh worship. And certainly it was never instituted in any of our temples. So here's an instance where Prabhupada's letter supersedes his direct presentation of Shastra.
Thank you, Prabhu. So coming back to this point of Varnashram, though, and I think that's really a very crucial point. And Prabhupada has also emphasized, he said, Varnashram, or what I have done so far, is only 50% of my mission or my vision. The other 50% is to establish Varnashram. He said this. So it is not something that's trivial. It is something fairly important, the fact that it's half of his vision, and he was hoping that we could do it. So maybe you can help us understand the importance of that statement.
Well, there is a background to that statement. This was a statement he made in 1977. You recall that quote that you gave earlier in his conversation with Hari Sari Prabhu. It was about this time. So Abhiram Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's nurse and confidant during those days, has confirmed that Srila Prabhupada wanted to come to the West, specifically to Gita Nagari, to show his disciples how to implement Varnashram, how to live off the land. Why would he have this very strong perception right at that time? Whatever I've done is 50%, now the other 50% is to establish Varnashram Dharma. Well, the reason for that, as explained by these devotees who were very intimate with him, is that Srila Prabhupada saw that the book distribution was well established and Krishna consciousness was spreading, but the young men who were doing the book distribution were falling down, or they were unable to maintain their position. Here's a picture of Srila Prabhupada with the Radha Damodar book distribution party in 1975 in Chicago. Srila Prabhupada is here in this circle, sitting at the feet of Radha Damodar. I was there at that time, and all of these men were my brothers. They were my tribe, and I knew them well. And all of us had this Bari de Kor. We're going to be brahmacharis, and then we're going to take sannyas, and that's our life. There wasn't a grihasta there among us. And out of this group, in this picture, about 5 men took sannyas. My unofficial calculation of that is that 4 of them did not succeed as sannyasis. One of them did, that's Giridhari Maharaj, who is still serving on the GBC. But all these aspiring sannyasis, the majority by far, ended up becoming grihastas. So at that time, because there was so much emphasis on staying brahmachari, as if that was the essence of Krishna consciousness. If you were not a brahmachari, you could not be Krishna conscious. There was so much stress on that. When these young men realized that it was not their nature to be lifelong celibates, they felt they had failed in their devotional service. And this was a tremendous emotional shock, as you can imagine. Going from the ecstasy of spiritual awakening, transcendental book distribution, so much encouragement from Srila Prabhupada, to feeling, oh, now I have to get married, and now I am a failure. Now I have come up short, and therefore I might as well give up my Krishna conscious practice since I'm a failure. Seeing this happening, Prabhupada very compassionately felt we need to have this Varnashram introduced so these devotees understand that there is a sustainable way to stay in Krishna consciousness throughout their lives.
So then that almost reinforces the necessity. Like, doesn't that mean that today Varnashram is of vital importance for devotees, for ISKCON, for the movement to move forward successfully. I mean, we should prioritize at the top of the, top of the list there. Should be all talking about.
Varnashram definitely is important. Amongst devotees, it is important as a safety net for those who are struggling to find their natural position in life. This Gajendra Leela in the 8th canto, Prabhupada was translating that when one of his sannyasi disciples, a very dear sannyasi disciple, fell down. And Srila Prabhupada was so compassionate. He wrote in the purport to the Gajendra Leela that this devotee should become a grihasta and find a position from which he could continue to battle Maya with strength. A natural condition of life is the phrase that Prabhupada used. And Prabhupada's compassion extended to the point even of conducting a marriage ceremony for a fallen sannyasi disciple.
But this word vantasi, one who eats his own vomit, has been used to describe sannyasi who then decides to go back. It's like really reverse after having given up the toxicity of the material world, and then it is considered, isn't that like horrendous violation of Varnashram principles in essence? I mean, it is even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he didn't tolerate this at all.
Yes, absolutely. And at the same time, because this devotee had given such sincere and valuable service, Srila Prabhupada accommodated him, he encouraged him, and he continued to engage him. So this idea that preaching and Varnashram are different things is a misunderstanding. They're not at odds. They're meant to work together. There's a phrase, a zero-sum game. It's either all one or all the other. That's what zero-sum game means. So it's a fallacy to say that you cannot preach unless you practice Varnashram, or to say the opposite for that matter.
So then even devotees, they should be practicing Varnashram principle. We should understand what they are, because that's crucial. For example, our women, they should observe the strict understanding of Stri Dharma and Varnashram, the codes for women to follow as espoused in Varnashram scriptures, and not try to go against the grain and vie and push politically for leadership roles like temple president, GBC, certainly not gurus. We see so many places, so many quotes about how they're less intelligent, their trustworthiness is very low, we should never trust a woman, and so on. We should, and of course, their tendency to be the downfall of men. There's so many things that they need to be made aware of, be educated on, and implemented in the ISKCON framework so as to promote this peaceful vision of Varnashram. And then we can have successful, growth of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, we'll just keep failing again, generation after generation.
What does Srila Prabhupada say about Stri Dharma? Here's a statement directly from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's taken from the discussion of Bhishma Dev with Yudhishthira Maharaj, explaining Stri Dharma specifically. As far as the women class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, women can create havoc in society by adultery. Adultery means production of unwanted children, known as Varna Sankara, who disturb the world. So Srila Prabhupada wrote, and here's an example of hermeneutics. Srila Prabhupada wrote this purport in Vrindavan before there was an ISKCON in the 60s. And then subsequently coming to the West, he engaged these powerful women in distributing books and raising funds. So one of them asked Srila Prabhupada, we're supposed to be shy, yet Kirtan, we're supposed to be aggressive. So Prabhupada said, yes, you be a lion on the prowl and a lamb at home. So although Srila Prabhupada appreciated this value of Vedic culture, of the shyness, he engaged his women in this very unshy-like service. And then later in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he praised them for their service and said they are as good as their brothers in the matter of preaching Krishna consciousness. So although in Vedic times women did not go out and preach, Srila Prabhupada freely overrode the external Varnashram standards in order to spread Krishna consciousness. Let me share another statement from Srila Prabhupada on this in this regard. Here's an important point. Not knowing that boys and girls in countries like Europe and America mix very freely, these fools and rascals criticize the boys and girls in Krishna consciousness for intermingling. But these rascals should not consider that one should suddenly change a community's social customs. To engage both boys and girls in fully transcendental activities is a policy intended to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. These jealous fools will simply have to be satisfied with their own foolishness because they cannot think of how to spread Krishna consciousness by adopting ways and means that are favorable for that purpose. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada were all heavily criticized by the Smarta Brahmins who wanted to put the Vedic principles and cultural practices first and foremost because it protected their position on the hierarchy. They were at the top. They didn't want to be threatened by people of non-Brahminical backgrounds getting a sacred thread, getting the Gayatri mantra, engaging in deity worship. So Srila Prabhupada was hearing that, his guru heard it, and we're hearing the same thing today. No, the Vedic principles supersede preaching Krishna consciousness. Just one more time, if I may, I'll share just one other reference in this regard. He says, I'm especially proud how my householder disciples are preaching Lord Chaitanya's mission. This is a new thing in the history of the Sankirtan movement. In India, all the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the man's side. Their wives were at home because that is a system from old times, that women are not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita, we find that women are also equally competent, like men, in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please, therefore, try to carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness. So we see, Prabhupada was not stopped by these Vedic so-called Varnashram principles. He preached, and similarly, we should also preach and not be stopped by them. This way, we're actually following the Acharya, the Mahajan in ISKCON.
So, Prabhupada, with all due respect, we do find repeatedly this concept in Prabhupada's letters, his purports, even his lectures, even his interviews with reporters and things like that. The bedrock social foundation of Varnashram, especially the point of protection. Women as a class have to always be under the protection, and there's probably 100 quotes on that point, that they have to be under protection, either of their father, husband, full-grown son, or some proper male figure. So this protection concept is not something that we can very easily dismiss, or this concept of protection that women always needed is not something that we can easily dismiss. And I would venture to guess that this is one of the fundamental aspects of Varnashram culture. So, how would you reconcile that very important principle?
Well, that is definitely true in the course of ordinary Varnashram culture. The whole point of Varnashram is to ensure that people come to bhakti. But Srila Prabhupada says over and over again, in so many places, that one who is already engaged in bhakti is in a different position. Here's one reference, just one, specifically on the point of women needing protection. He writes he spoke rather in a lecture. Of course, when women come to Krishna consciousness, that position is different. We are speaking of ordinary women. So when we study things from material point of view, these things are to be taken care. But when a man or woman becomes Krishna conscious, he or she takes care of herself or himself. Arjuna is speaking of ordinary women. So you see, the position of a devotee is already at the pinnacle has already surpassed Varnashram Dharma. This is why Ramananda Roy presented to Lord Chaitanya Varnashram as the conclusion of the scriptures. Lord Chaitanya rejected it. No, there's something higher. So if we regress and we think, no, Varnashram is the highest, Varnashram is our priority, we miss the whole point. Varnashram is just meant to bring people to bhakti. If you're at bhakti, why do you need to have Varnashram? Varnashram is for those who either are not yet in bhakti or perhaps for those who are struggling with their devotional service.
Now, Prabhu, see this, it's all about time, place, and circumstance. So this particular angle or aspect, it may have been okay in the early days of ISKCON. You know, there's a wave of feminism, whatever it may be. But we are more advanced now. You know, we've been more mature. We should be boiling the milk. We should focus, you know, devotees are, you know, we can see things better. And now we can introduce Varnashram principles as Prabhupada directed. You know, it needs time, and I think enough time has passed that we should now full force turn on the stove and boil the milk and really implement it so that it creates a social foundation for the next 10,000 years.
Even if doing that means giving up the first 50% of Prabhupada's mission of preaching. Although Prabhupada's mission is Paschatya Desa Tarini, preaching in the Western countries, we've become more focused on Indian communities around the world. And most of these people, these devotees, already understand so much about Varnashram principles. So how are we supposed to boil the milk if there's no milk to boil? Putting the Varnashram before preaching is just putting the cart before the horse. First, we have to preach, bring people to Krishna consciousness, and then people can adopt and apply the Varnashram principles as appropriate in their lives.
So, Prabhu, there's this Krishna Life project in Atlanta, for example, and it is very successful. They're distributing thousands upon thousands of books, breaking records in book distribution, even though there's just a handful of devotees. They're making new devotees hand over fist. They're preaching in the West and also promoting this Varnashram concept, the culture. So we see that actually Varnashram is what leads to real success in preaching, not just in India. This is an example in the West. Should we not then prioritize Varnashram in the West today, like they're doing so successfully, and just follow in that concept?
Yes, the Krishna Life devotees in Atlanta are doing amazing book distribution, just fantastic. And they're bringing people to Krishna consciousness also. So I have nothing but appreciation for them. In fact, when the devotees who were running that program were first contemplating how to do it, they came to visit me in Gainesville and to ask for advice, because we'd been successfully bringing people to Krishna for years there in Gainesville, Krishna House. So we freely gave them all the guidance we could, and we conveyed that one of the key things for us was opening a woman's ashram. And that's what turned the tide and started bringing intelligent, educated young men and women to Krishna consciousness. So these devotees took that to heart and opened a women's ashram there at the Krishna Life Project in Atlanta. In fact, most of the newcomers that they are attracting are women. I'll show you, if I may. Here's a picture from their website. So Prabhuji, yes, the Krishna Life devotees in Atlanta are doing amazing service. They're distributing record-breaking numbers of books. They're bringing new people to Krishna consciousness. I have nothing but admiration and appreciation for what they're doing. Before they began, in fact, the brahmacharis who were starting the project came to visit us in Gainesville to find out how we had been successful in attracting so many people to Krishna consciousness. And one of the secrets we shared was that we had a women's ashram, a brahmacharini ashram, and they took that to heart and opened one. And you can see from this picture from the Krishna Life website that most of the new people they're attracting are women. And these women are holding stacks of books. So just in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, they are engaging these women in preaching and spreading Krishna consciousness. So they're doing great book distribution, but the other part of the things I advise them about, they haven't taken so much to heart. Starting things takes passion and it's exciting, but maintaining them takes goodness. And to maintain a Krishna conscious project, we need to have a broader vision for what devotees need. So in the long run, the advice we gave them is to look at how you can maintain a community. You can build a community, as we did in the 70s, all over the country. We're building enthusiastic devotee communities. But then the young men started having trouble with their Krishna consciousness. And this is why Prabhupada wanted to implement Varnashrama at the end of his manifest pastimes. So the Krishna life devotees would do well to learn from that experience. Maintaining a successful community takes the mode of goodness, you know? So what is going to sustain? This is a question. And in the name of Varnashram, the Krishna life devotees are not practicing spiritual gender equity as we advise them to do. I had asked actually to visit the devotees there, but they asked me not to come. They really don't want me to visit. So I haven't seen personally, but I've learned from others who have been allowed to visit that the women there sit in the back of the temple room. They're not allowed to lead kirtans or give classes. And these are things that are being done in the name of Varnashram. Now, my question is this going to be sustainable? Well, time will tell over the next few years. They're not part of ISKCON. They want to be separate from ISKCON because of this very principle. They feel ISKCON is not properly following Prabhupada's orders on Varnashram, and they are. So the question is, in the long run, will they be able to maintain a community on their own? They're building, but can they maintain? What will these nice young women do when they realize that most of the Vaishnavis in North America are able to lead classes, give kirtans, and take roles as temple presidents? As one example, there's a young man in our community locally who had gotten some books from these wonderful book distributors in Krishna life. And he was coming to the temple where there's a woman temple president. And then after a while, he said, "Oh, I'm going to have to leave. I have to go to Atlanta." And his mentor said, "Why?" He said, "Well, they told me that it was Maya to be in a temple or associated with a temple run by a woman." So fortunately, the mentor was able to help him understand he has relationships, he has friends, he doesn't need to uproot his life because this is the one and only place where Krishna consciousness is actually being practiced properly. You see? So back in the zonal acharya days in the 80s, after Prabhupada's departure, there was a lot of chaos and we didn't know what to do. The GBC was struggling and the gurus became very prominent and they were surpassed the GBC. So the GBC was trying to kind of prop up that system. And when the gurus had trouble, they would kind of, they'd excuse and they would apologize or they would rationalize. So we had a phrase back then, it was called mushroom devotees. Mushroom devotee is a devotee that you keep in the dark, feed manure, and hope they grow. So I'm concerned that maybe some of these young women in Atlanta might be in that category. Are they just being isolated from what other practitioners of bhakti are doing around them in the hopes that they will somehow adjust to this Varnashram social role that is prescribed to them according to the hermeneutical interpretation of the scriptures by Bhakti Vikash Maharaj and others? So, hey, it's a big world. I appreciate that they're reaching out and we'll see. But my impression is, having observed the Radha Damodar party and having observed Prabhupada's recognition of the need for most people to be grihastas, that it will be a struggle to maintain in the long run.
Sure, there's those are all valid observations and trends and so on, but we can't just take the whole Varnashram package and just toss it out, just throw it out. Prabhupada said this is his mission. He has so many quotes about it. So to throw Varnashram out in the name of, just to appease something, I mean, it's like it's a travesty to throw that whole thing out or to reject it completely.
Oh, Prabhu, who said anything about throwing it out? Who said anything about going to war with Prabhupada's instructions on Varnashram? The thing is that Varnashram has so many facets. And so why should we pick one facet that will alienate the public in the West, such as like telling women they should take a back seat in society? Why not focus on promoting organic agriculture, which would be very popular and well received? Why not focus on training men to be good grihastas? Let me read you a quote from Srila Prabhupada about this. He said, he writes in the third canto, there are 4 orders for cooperation in the endeavor for liberation from material existence. The orders of brahmachari, or pious student life, household life with a wife, retired life, and renounced life all depend for successful advancement on the householder who lives with a wife. This cooperation is essential for the proper functioning of the institution of the 4 social orders and the 4 spiritual orders of life. By helping the other 3 sections of society cultivate spiritual values, the householder also makes advancement in spiritual life. Ultimately, every member of society automatically becomes spiritually advanced and easily crosses the ocean of nescience. So this is the way that, and householders have this crucial role. Here Prabhupada is saying very clearly that it is essential for the householders to be strong. So part of applying Varnashram would be to encourage men, yes, be responsible husbands, be responsible fathers. That is a message that resonates well with a wide swath of population in the West. Why don't we emphasize that? See, it takes intelligence to pick out the aspects of philosophy to present, because it's so diverse, because Prabhupada spoke on so many subjects, and because the scriptures have so many different ways of being examined. There was an instance in Los Angeles in 1973 where 2 enthusiastic disciples had been going out and doing college preaching. So they came back to Srila Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, when we show the professors this excerpt from the Krishna book where about Maharaj Ugrasen providing teachers for the Yadu dynasty, all of the descendants of Krishna, one of the last chapters in the Krishna book. There were so many hundreds of millions and trillions of and billions of people. And so the professors laugh and say, where do they put the bathrooms? So Prabhupada said, so you show them another section of Srimad Bhagavatam that they can relate to. And these disciples would not quit, but they said, Prabhupada, but they want to know, how is it physically possible? There could have been so many. There could have been so many. And Prabhupada kept telling them over and over again, no, you just give them some section they can understand. Then they asked the 3rd time, and that time Prabhupada said something he never said anywhere else to my knowledge. He said, you do not require spiritual master. So when they would not listen to the founder Acharya and tried to put his books in front of him and tried to ignore his advice to pick an appropriate facet of our vast knowledge that will be effective in our preaching, he dismissed them as disciples. He dismissed them. You do not require spiritual master. It's over-intelligent, you see. So in the same way, if we emphasize some aspect of Varna ashram culture, like putting women in an inferior position to men, in this country, in this part of the world, it is a very negative message. It is a very repulsive message. It's a very ignorant message to most people. Bear in mind that 25% of the children in America are raised in a single family household. And so they're, in most cases, the mothers are raising them. And these women are earning a living, and they're nurturing the children, and they're maintaining the house. And now you're supposed to be in a subordinate position to man, right? That's a joke. It just seems like so disconnected from reality. So instead of focusing on the women, focus on the men. Krishna consciousness means you become a devotee, you become a responsible husband, you become a responsible father, you take care of your wife, you take care of your children. Then we could talk about other issues concerning women. But this is a message, you see, that will resonate, that will gain respect for Prabhupada's movement. So we should not be like these over-intelligent God brothers in Los Angeles. We should follow Prabhupada's clear instruction, pick out the aspects of our philosophy that work. Halena Parachiyate, and emphasize those. There's so many to choose from.
Yes, thank you so much, Kalakantha Prabhu, for this very lively discussion on this vast topic. Of course, we only had a few minutes today, but we do hope to understand more. There are definitely two opinions on a lot of these things, and we appreciate the fact that you took your time and shared your understanding and your experiences, your personal observations, and of course, 50 plus years of seeing things work and what doesn't work and so on. So we do appreciate you shedding some light from your perspective. And thank you all, dear devotees, for joining us on this Unity in Diversity channel. As we bring more content for you, we hope that you find it useful and enlightening. And please share your comments and so on below. And do join us next time as we explore this vast arena of how we can apply the teachings and the principles laid out by Srila Prabhupada in our modern day ISKCON. Thank you very much, Kalakantha Prabhu again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,